Okay, hi, I'm JJ Morgan. This is Seasoned and Fresh Back to School Strategies in the Voces Digital Summer Workshop. Welcome everyone. Our agenda today, we're going to talk about organizing our room, creating routines, and goal setting. We're going to talk about community language acquisition and parent buy-in. And then we're also going to briefly discuss introducing students to Voces. So that is a lot to get through in an hour. And please, if you have any questions, feel free, excuse me, feel free to pop them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. That would totally be fine too. So whatever works for you. Sometimes I tend to get going fast, so somebody might need to like, let's put some whoa to your giddy up. Okay, we're going to start with organizing your classroom and creating routines and goal setting. So we really need to plan our teaching space. I know when I first started, I had colors over there, and I had question words over here, and I had the Super 7 over there, and just a random poster with a quote or a phrase on it somewhere else. I didn't plan the space where I spent the most teaching. When I finally did do that, it made my life so much easier in my classroom. And so your classroom walls can be your space. They do more than just fill up the space. You can use them to inspire, engage, and educate. So posters. We have tons and tons of posters at Teachers Discovery. Whether you are a teacher who prefers to teach with grammar or with stories, it doesn't matter. We've got you covered. But you're going to want your posters that you refer to a lot in your teaching area. So in your main area, so that you can easily point to them and get the prompts that you need for repetition or recall or reinforcement. Your on-the-spot grammar reminders, placed easily accessible so that you can find them and not have to go hunting. There we go. Okay, also what you place on your walls matters. Not just any random placement, but in the world language classroom especially, every single visual is a chance for meaningful input. They aren't just decor, they're part of your instructional strategy. You can surround your students with the target language, you can reinforce key structures, and you can provide repeated exposure to vocabulary and grammar in context. So colors, let's talk about colors. Colors are not just visuals. They're not just there to add pop. They actually have meaning in your classroom. Different wavelengths of color help you, are interpreted by your brain as different energy levels. And so they can impact your neurological pathways and your biochemical responses. So they can impact how your brain is accessing information, and they can impact how you feel. On days when I'm feeling chill, I tend to dress in more muted colors. If you ask anyone that I work with, that's not very often because I'm always in brightly colored shirts or skirts or whatever. And those wavelengths of those colors mimic my feelings, that I'm upbeat and happy and ready to go. So shiftelearning.com tells us that colors influence how we perceive information, and they can either enhance or hinder our learning process. So think about that for a minute. We don't want the learning hindered in our classroom. We always want it to be enhanced. So think about where you place your different visuals in your classroom. Create a calming wall with soothing colors and soft images. I know post-COVID, a lot of schools added one class period for students to be able to, for everybody to have like a mandatory study hall, right? For students to be able to get extra help, get their work done. And that shortened the regular class periods, whether you're on block schedule or you're on a straight schedule. Um, they went to 8 or 9 class periods, which takes you down to sometimes 40 minutes. Well, your students have barely calmed down and gotten themselves situated in the class when the bell rings and they have to get up and run to the next class again, right? And some of our class buildings are really, really huge buildings, and students get 4 minutes to go half a mile to the next class and go to the bathroom and their locker. So they're always, due to the nature of the way it's designed, they're always hyped up, amped up. So you can create a calming wall with soothing colors and soft images, and you can tell students, hey, if you're feeling anxious or you're feeling unable to focus, spend some time looking at this wall, spend some time checking out these messages and make sure they understand what everything means. You might even, for your lower levels, you might even translate the posters and have them on white paper next to them that they can kind of repeat to themselves as a mantra. And back to what I was saying earlier, create a teaching wall with frequently used phrases. For me, that was the Super 7 in third person, which is right here on the left, and first person, which is here on the right. Also, though, one of my routines every week, if not every day in the beginning, at least once a week, we focused on what the weather was for that day. And so I had my weather poster near my teaching area so that students knew when I walked over to it, they knew what to expect. So setting this expectation, setting this routine, as well as doing calendar talk or whatever your routine may be, is super helpful. And knowing what that's going to be before you walk in the door, even more so. Maybe create a reading nook. So Moore, Neville, and Hall in 2003 did a study on learning spaces and behavior. And they found that cozy, clearly defined nooks signal that reading is valued and encouraged, and they promote more sustained, independent reading. And we all know that the more you read, the higher your success, right? The correlation is there. In your first language, to build your vocabulary, teachers give you readers to read and say, read, 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 read. It's the most natural way to build vocabulary when you're reading something that you're engaged in, rather than reading your science book that every third word you don't know what it means. So create a reading area. Comfortable, well-lit, and inviting spaces are shown to reduce reading anxiety and improve concentration. And knowing that that space is available, it can double as a calming down area of your room too, as a quiet corner, a reset space, so to speak. And this is from Barrett et al. From 2015, Clever Classrooms. It was a study from the University of Salford. Allington and Cunningham in 2007 wrote that classroom libraries and reading nooks directly influence students' reading volume, which correlates with achievement. Also providing a space for students to read, and this is kind of a plug for FVR too, or SSR, sustained silent reading and free voluntary reading, which I always called free voluntary mandatory reading because it was free and voluntary what you read, but it was mandatory that you do it. So I tossed that in there. But it also aids in equity, in creating an equitable environment for your students, because not everyone has the same access to reading. Some students can't get to the library. The library is a free resource, right? It's free to borrow books, but not all students can get to the public library, right? We have school libraries, but they might also be limited. So adding a reading area in your classroom is an equitable practice. Sometimes I lose, there it is. So some tips for building your classroom library. Well, you can go to vocesunplugged.com. If you haven't been there, you can sort books by author. You can sort them by language. You can sort them by level. You can also go to teachersdiscovery.com. There is a very wide variety of readers there. Funding is a big deal, right? You don't want to fund it. You can't fund everything out of your own pocket, even if you want to. You can't. So Donors Choose or GoFundMe. Or here's an easy way. In the Our World series, you can print and organize stories that you maybe don't have time to get to and put them in your reading area. So you know, in level 1, there are 4 short stories and 4 long stories in every single chapter, and you maybe aren't going to touch on every single one of those, right? In level 3, you might not have time to get to the biographies or the leveled information. So this is Nuestra Historia 3, Unit 4, and this is a Cesar Chavez biography, and you can see that it has a before reading activity, it has 3 comprehension activities, and an after reading. You could print all of those and make them accessible to students, or you can just print the story itself. And in the new V4 version of Voces, you're gonna love it because it's right here next to the story. It says print. You're gonna click, you can click the print button, it pops up. It's easier to use than ever before. So creating your own library is super, super easy. From Notre Histoire, Unit 1, Level 3, A Strange First Day in French. This is a super simple story, and maybe look at all these stories. You just maybe aren't going to get to all of them. And so print the ones that you know in advance, and put them in your library. If you're one-to-one, sign up for Flangu and assign some reading that way. So this story in particular has relatable emotions. She's nervous about her first day. It has a little suspense and humor. She goes to one classroom and they're dancing and she's like, oh my gosh, why are they dancing? And she doesn't know because it's her first day at the school. She goes to another classroom and they're wearing a mask. So there's a little bit of suspense. It introduces culture because they're celebrating. It has super, super simple language. So even if you have it in there for beginners, they're going to be able to read it, and it's open-ended, so you can use it in many, many ways. So for more on how to use posters, this slide got moved. It should have been up there with the posters a little bit, but at Teachers Discovery, just go to any poster, and Melissa has written an amazing teacher's inspiration guide with so many ideas of ways that you can use posters, and it's free. You just download it, and there's probably 10 ideas in there of ways that you can use them. So goal setting as part of our getting ourselves back in the routine. Zimmerman in 2002 and is it Schunk and Ertmer from 2000 show that goal setting and self-assessment, which are key features of can-do statements, improve learner motivation, self-regulation, and achievement. So yes, we're told by ACTFL and we're told by our admin that we need to put can-do statements, but there's not really a communication with us about why sometimes, unless we dig deeper to go into it. So there really is a link between posting them and a growth mindset, right? Instead of something being impossible, I'm possible, right? So a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. In growth, abilities can be developed through effort, effective strategies, and help from others. So it is a core belief. It is something that you believe in, and it's any kind of ability. even though I do say from time to time, I'm not good at math, I'm not a math person, it's not actually true. It's just that I don't want to take the time and effort required to be really good at math, right? A fixed mindset believes that you're static, that you're either good at something or you're not good at something, that you have a brain that absorbs language or you don't have a brain that absorbs language. And the truth of the matter is, you do. If you speak a first language, you have a brain that absorbs language. You are set up, you are geared, you are ready to go with language. You don't need a special tool, you don't need a special gimmick. You're already able. And the growth mindset believes that. It believes that you can work on your skills and develop them and improve them. So using can-do statements like I can introduce myself helps students see learning as a journey. They're working toward goals, not simply being graded on right or wrong. And this is from Dweck in 2006, and Dweck coined the fixed and growth mindset. Do you like my AI generated image? That was from Canva. I don't do a lot with AI, but images is one that I will sometimes play with. So here are some examples of can-do statements from Voces por el Mundo, which is our grammar-based series, level 3, chapter 5, activity 2. I can interpret simple sentences about various professions, right? It's something that they can do at the end of the lesson. So, and it's also a skill that can grow with practice. From Voix du Monde 1, which is also our grammar French series, chapter 3, activity 18, I can describe someone's appearance and personality. So they're all built in. And you have at the beginning of a chapter, you have a can-do pre-assessment. And at the end of the chapter, you revisit it. So at the beginning, you're like, I can do these things, and you score yourself based upon a scale of how able you are to do them. And then you go back and reflect at the end of the chapter and see what your growth is. And that reflection piece is part of what builds the growth mindset. So community language acquisition, and parent buy-in. So Lev Vygotsky, who we all studied in our education classes, sociocultural theory underscores that learning happens through social interaction. In world language classrooms, community building fosters the collaborative, communicative interactions essential for language development. Also, you may have heard of this guy Krashen, who in 1982 developed the affective filter hypothesis. And that is just that a low anxiety situation makes, calms your brain and makes things accessible for you, makes learning accessible. A sense of community increases emotional safety, encourages risk-taking and speaking, and decreases fear of making mistakes. If you go into how the brain operates, you can liken the affective filter to the amygdala. If the amygdala, the oldest part of your brain, is hyped up and on guard, messages are going to go out from the amygdala to the rest of your brain. Messages aren't going to go in, right? So the thinking and analyzing, the paying attention to what the teacher is doing, they're not going to go in. Nothing is going to be absorbed if the amygdala is in charge of the brain, because its job is to keep you safe. So if the amygdala senses danger, then that means the affective filter is up, and you cannot get through the affective filter. It has to be down. So you need a low anxiety supportive classroom for that to happen. Well, we have some resources built in to the Our Story series. This is in Spanish. So Profe Loco is a video series that we have. He does some really funny, really cute videos. De donde es super lápiz? It's from Senior Jordan, super lápiz, super pencil. We have that in Spanish and French. We have Go Vive a Tu Manera resources built in for the novice and intermediate levels. And then there's this wonderful place called the Hub, where you can go and get all kinds of videos on how to do so many of the strategies that you hear about with story asking and picture talk. And it's just a plethora of, excuse me, of videos and written articles to help you in your teaching. So for language acquisition and parent buy-in, we need to teach students about language acquisition and how it's different from learning. So I teach my students about crash-in. I teach them about the affective filter, and I teach them about the amygdala, because I think the more they know about themselves, the more likely they are to know if they're in a state of learning or not in a state of learning. And I've found over time that teaching, especially with teaching them about the amygdala, they recognize when someone in the class is not in an optimal learning state. They recognize when you, the teacher, are not in the optimal state for teaching. And they can help, like we can all help each other in calming and growing. So I assign my students homework to teach their parents a little bit about language acquisition and a little bit about the amygdala. And I get so many comments back from parents when I see them in the community, like, I didn't know this, and my kid came home and told me. And another thing that I do is with the very first story in level 1 that we read together, and students are 100% successful in reading and understanding, I tell them to go home, I print out that story, and I tell them to take it and read it to your parents. And it's just a paragraph that I print in great big letters in a big font so that it takes up a little more space. And I tell them to read it to their parents and translate it for them and tell them what it means. And parents love this. They are like, you are 3 weeks into school and you can read this paragraph? I made it through 3 years of Spanish and I couldn't read a paragraph that size, right? So it's impressive. Newsletters with quotes and research in it. You can send a newsletter home. Communicate regularly and positively with parents. And this goes into community building too. Parents don't get calls from school that their kid did something good. They get calls from school that their kid did something bad. So be that teacher who every once in a while is like, you know, I saw your student helping someone today, and I just wanted you to know what a great citizen they're being. What an outstanding student you have. And parents are very thankful to hear good things. So introducing students to Voces and language acquisition. So again, teach them about the acquisition. And this is a delightful video from, it's coming off, Julie Thompson. I'll put the link in the chat.
Your foolproof guide to becoming bilingual. Meet Jimmy. Jimmy has a dream. A dream to be really, really good at yoga. Jimmy gets on the internet and finds some great information about yoga. Everything he needs to know is at his fingertips. Over the next several months, Jimmy studies all of the names of the poses, or asanas, and what perfect asanas look like. Wow, this one looks cool. This one too. Jimmy figures out exactly where to place his arms and legs and where to center his balance. Step 1, sit on the floor. Step 2, put your head on the ground. Step 3, wrap your ankles around your head. Easy. With all this knowledge he has learned over several months, Jimmy determines that he's now an expert yogi. Time to do some yoga. Uh-oh. Oof. Jimmy was not successful at yoga. How could this be? Pause the video and discuss. What went wrong? Why can't Jimmy do yoga? You probably came to the conclusion that just because Jimmy learned information about yoga, it does not mean that he gained the skills necessary to do the yoga. Acquiring and developing skills is not the same as learning facts, knowledge, or information. Both are important, but only one will give you the abilities to perform. This is true with language learning as well. This is Dr. Stephen Krashen. He has a PhD.
Okay, so it's a 14-minute video, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. But you can see, and I will share the link at the end of the presentation to this video. It's a great introduction video for students, and even to share with parents. You can share the link with parents too. You can see, knowing, or I don't know if you can see because we just watched a tiny bit of it, but knowing about language acquisition and knowing about how your class is going to be set up, it goes a really, really long way to giving students the confidence to be successful in your classroom. Stop. There we go. Voces makes it easy to introduce students to Voces. So we have a video, Welcome to Voces Digital, in the directory, which you are going to love in V4. It's just on the left-hand side of your screen. With the 3 lines, you click it and it shows you everything. You don't have to go searching for it. We have a welcome video here. Students can play. It's a minute long. Then you can assign them sample activities. And this one is a multiple choice, just so they can get a feel for how things are going to be working in your classroom. And then a little bit of bonus material. We have some sub-plans. You can't be ready for the year if you don't have a plan on what's going to happen on the day that you wake up and you can't go to school because you're not feeling well. So we have some sub-plans at Teachers Discovery, substitute teacher plans for world language. And they come in a .doc or a .pdf. And we have them in English, French, Spanish, German, and Italian. And they're 3-page lesson plan, super easy, and can be applied at any level. So you pick a reading, students do some things with the reading, then they reflect on it, and then they make some connections. And the same with the Explore, Reflect, and Connect. So that is, and it looks like I have finished kind of early, but that is our fresh and seasoned, sorry, fresh and seasoned presentation, some strategies to get you going for the school year. What questions do we have, or what more do you want to know about? The sub-plans, let me show you where those are. Right here on Teachers Discovery. Oh, this, by the way, I put in Spanish poster, and this, with any poster and that we have, and this is where you will find, you just scroll down, and that's where the inspiration guide is that you can download. And it's 6 pages with grammar and vocabulary posters, dry erase posters, inspirational catchy phrases, travel, enhanced, gallery walk, more gallery walk. I will share the link, Avis, for you. How do you get to TD from Voces? You don't get there from from Voces. You just type it in the URL, teachersdiscovery.com. I can put the link for posters that I just showed you in the chat. Sure. That's easy to do. And I was going to show you subplans. Let me think about where they are on here. Is it free? Ruby, say more. Is TDs free for Voces members, subscribers? Teachers Discovery is a website with teaching materials on it. And you can search by language or by product, by chat mat. Well, I guess we don't want social studies. By geography and maps, like you can, you go to the website and you just search for what it is, whatever it is that you're looking for. So readers can come, it comes up with just a wide variety, and you can narrow it down to Spanish. You can narrow it down by language. Subplans. Yes. Jody put the link to this. Thank you, Jody, for putting the link to the subplans in there. Do I have specific suggestions for resources and activities to stimulate the growth mindset in students during the learning process for French and Spanish? So during the learning process for anything, whether it be French or Spanish or math or whatever, it is one, giving students the confidence to know that errors are how we achieve mastery, right? And we can't achieve mastery without making errors, spelling errors, grammar errors, word choice errors. I mean, I have a friend who studied in Mexico when she was in high school, and then when she was in college, she went back and visited her family, and she went to the dad of the family, and instead of saying embrace me, she said embarazame, which is not embrace me. It's not give me a hug. It meant something else entirely. She learned from making that mistake never to do that again, right? So we all make mistakes, and that's how we learn. So making the classroom a place where mistakes are normal and accepted, and perfection is not what we want, that is the first thing for building a growth mindset. Giving students achievable goals, right, that they can actually do. And this goes into the can do statements. Let me show you what it looks like. I'm logged in. I was logged in here. Let me show you what a can do, what a can do pre-assessment looks like. So at the beginning of each chapter, you have an assessment. This one is about interpretive reading. I can understand events in a story about a boy and a girl in class. Well, can they do that before the chat? Like at the very beginning of the school year, they haven't had any at all. They haven't had any language class at all. No. So probably they're gonna select I need help. Some of them maybe have had a little bit of Spanish. And so they can say, yes, I'm almost there. Yes, I can. I can do this and more, right? But this then leads to, and here's that beautiful directory that I was telling you about that pops up. At the end of the unit, you have the can-do checklist. Well, now I can understand events in a story about a boy and a girl in class. Are you there? I can do this and more. Right? So this is showing them how much they've grown over time. So taking the time to reflect on your acquisition during the year. I'm sorry, what? Maybe that was an accidental unmuting. So taking the time to reflect on your learning is another big part of growth mindset. And I highly encourage you to do a little bit of reading about the growth mindset, because there are a lot of strategies out there. Yes, hold on. Let's see. Here's the link. This is the link for the video that I just played. And there is a slideshow that I'm going to put in there too. And I will show you a little bit about the slideshow. These were not created by me, but they were shared openly on Facebook. And this one is by Teresa Jansen. And this is how will we learn Spanish this year, and what should I do to be successful? This is a really good, simple breakdown. It's 22 slides. You can do it in a class period, right? And I even go back periodically and show these resources to students again. Maybe not the video because it's 14 minutes, but definitely the slideshow, because they need to be reminded, right? Repetition is key to acquisition of anything. And it doesn't matter if you have to repeat it 12 times, repeat it, right? Because the learning isn't about us and what we can do. The learning is for them and what they are going to be able to do. Alex, the presentations will be shared at the end of the conference, I think Erin said. We're also recording every session, so you'll be able to go back and watch any of the sessions. Have I missed any questions? Oh, we have comments that they love the pre-can-do assessments. They're very helpful.
We did have one about online only classrooms, if you had any specific insight for those teachers.
I don't. I have not taught in an online only situation. I have taught in a hybrid situation, and I can tell you some of the comments that I received about how and what I taught were geared towards how I made them feel included. I'm going to stop sharing this real quick. If I can get my mouse over. Made them feel included even when they were the only one online and everyone else was in school. So yeah, unfortunately I do not have experience. Is Justin still on here? Because Justin just did 3 days of online language teaching. He might be able to help us out.
Oh, he may.
I am here, yes. Let's see if my picture comes back. Here it is. So I caught the question was about how to apply some of these things online. But I didn't see the question in the chat itself, and I want to make sure to address whatever detail there was. If there was something, a very specific situation or a certain aspect of what JJ talked about, how to apply that online. Just want to give whoever wrote the question the opportunity if there's any clarification or other detail on that. Okay. Yeah, so Jennifer, I don't know what exactly your situation is. I've done a lot of teaching online, including teaching with the kinds of materials and approaches that JJ has shared and that other folks will share throughout this time here. For me personally, I try, and all the way back in 2020 when we're making these shifts, what I really tried to focus on was all online public school synchronous. Okay, that's helpful info. I'm most comfortable the more my online teaching feels like in-person teaching, right? There are ways to shift and lean fully into the online aspect, and I do take advantage of some of those things, and I'll share those in a moment. But for me personally, as much as possible, I like it to feel like in-person teaching. And so what that means for me is things like having sometimes physical props. I don't have sitting right here right now a stuffed animal, but having physical items that I can use, having a little whiteboard like this that I can write things on, just because I feel more comfortable having those physically present things. And the more comfortable I am, the more likely students are to feel comfortable. The next big decision for me is, how are students going to participate? In other words, will they hopefully, and in your specific setting with your online school, I don't know if there are school-wide policies for video on or video off or things like that. Ideally, of course, students will have their video on so that you can actually see what's going on in your space. I see they don't have to have it on. In that case, I respect that, of course. But as far as how do students participate, it can be unmute yourself and say a thing. Or one thing that I agree, Jennifer, it really makes it hard to connect with students when videos are off. Something that I do like about teaching via Zoom or Google Meet or whatever setting you use, or if your school uses a proprietary platform, is that the ability to type responses in the chat opens up a lot of cool things that are a little trickier to do in person. For instance, sometimes if I'm collecting information, I can have students, and I have heard of a school or two where this was disabled. If it's not disabled for your setting, I recommend giving it a shot. Namely, every once in a while, have students, for example, share an answer just with you. In other words, if you're using Zoom, for example, it can be a direct message. You can set in the chat whether you're messaging just the teacher or everyone. And so that's a way that I can get an answer from every single student, but it's sort of confidential. Not as in super secret info, but they don't have to hear, they don't have to worry about other students hearing or seeing their answers. So that reduces the affective filter a little bit. I can get some information from every single student instead of just from the first one or two students to reply. So that's a way that I actually lean into that online system. And of course, you can have other ways of using the chat where it is not public, but for the entire class. So whether that's brainstorming answers, whether that's discussing a picture that you're sharing on your screen or anything like that. So I definitely use the chat a lot, and actually like that aspect of teaching online. When you say, Jennifer, when you say record a response, you're referring to like an audio response? Yeah, right. Is it Zoom that you use, or is it another platform? Yeah, so Chris has pointed out that not as a feature of Zoom, to my knowledge, not native to Zoom. Technically, you can drop an audio file into Zoom and send it as a message, but that's pretty cumbersome. If you are using Voces and you are doing any of the activities that involve students recording their voice, then that is a thing that students can do and submit directly to you, and you can give audio or typed feedback or in-person feedback, not in person, but real-time feedback when you're chatting with students, whatever you prefer there. So, but yeah, oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I'm glad you're set up with a decent and enjoyable platform. But yeah, the main things I would say, maybe wrapping up some of those, this is kind of a global thought, and this will apply to other folks, even if you're not teaching online. I won't go into detail of it too much, but there's, I forget who the communication theorist, he basically pointed out there's 4 levels of technology implementation. And the first level is you're basically just doing with technology exactly the same things that you might do in person. So if I could show a picture in person, I could also show a picture via Zoom or something like that. Boom, all I'm doing is mimicking with technology something that I could do without that technology. That's kind of the lowest level. That's not a value judgment. That's just the most immediate transfer. And that builds it each level. I won't go through each one, but basically the next one is something like you're doing the same thing, but you're allowing for some additional functionality. That might be like a word processor. You do the same stuff as if you're writing by hand, but you can highlight, you can copy and paste, you can all this kind of stuff. And it works its way all the way up to the kind of level 4 of technology implementation, where you're truly doing things that you simply could not do without that technology. And whenever I either have to use a piece of technology, like if I'm using Zoom to teach online, or if there's some other piece, I try to think through a little bit, okay, what are some things that I'm going to do where I'm just going to do the exact same thing that I might do in person, but I happen to be using some kind of technology on top of it. And what are some things, some features of the platform, of the technology that would allow me to actually do some cool new teaching or learning things that are almost impossible to do in person, or that are almost, in this case, or that are almost impossible to do without this piece of technology, and kind of lean into those for some of it. So for example, being able to receive a confidential answer from every student at the same time, that's an example of something I can't do in person, but it's a cool feature of Zoom and some other things where there's that private chat. Another example is Zoom and other platforms too have different kind of polling systems built in. So the fact that I can either pre-write those questions or do them on the fly and then have that yield a graph of students' responses, that's a cool thing that I can't do with just analog materials in person. Now, I could in person have students on their phones submitting, replying to some poll or something, but that's another example that I would say that's where, hey, that's a cool thing. We couldn't simultaneously receive everyone's answer and see it represented on a pie chart at a glance. That's a cool thing that I'm gonna take advantage of if I'm gonna be using this technology anyway. I'll make myself a note. I have a couple ideas, and you may have found blog posts and things like that that expand on some of these things as well. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Justin just taught Latin last week at the CI Summit to a group of language teachers as part of being a novice student as a teacher who is not novice in the language that they teach, but going back and feeling feeling the joy and the aha moments of being a true novice in a language. And he did that online for us in Latin.
one kind of extreme, I don't know what your setup is there at home. Jennifer, are you sitting, is that A-frame cool cabin thing that I'm seeing? Is that your home? I love it. I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Since JJ mentioned that class that I taught and that example, I really went for the kind of the far end of making it as much like a classroom as possible, where I had an actual physical whiteboard behind me and was teaching on the board just like I might otherwise, again, because that's how I feel most comfortable. But I still had that computer in front of me to see as many people's faces as possible, type in the chat when possible. So I was trying to kind of get the best of both worlds there. If I don't have access to that kind of setup and I am kind of going full online, then what I'll often do is, Zoom has the feature, and so do some other platforms where you can, if you have slides to share, you can have those appear behind you as your virtual background instead of just sharing your screen where your screen shows big and then there's just a tiny little window of your face. And so it's a little bit tricky to set up, but it might be worth it if this is kind of your main teaching setting. And then basically what I do when I do that is I make sure that I set up my slides so that this strip right here is blank on the slide, because that's where I'm going to be sitting. But then I can point to the items on my slide like this. I'm still bigger, so I feel like it helps people pay attention to me more. And also if I want to make some gestures, or if I want to pick up a little whiteboard like that, like this, I still can. But it also shows whatever like if I want to talk about a picture, I can have that projected right here. If I want to have a word wall, like with question words, I can have them across the top of each slide. But again, it appears behind me rather than instead of me. Yeah, I love the way you phrase that thing about separated, because a lot of times when I pitch this idea to teachers, I use that very word. But sharing our screen is great because of all the stuff we can share, but it's here, right? And I'd rather have it here, and I'd rather have me be on the same side of the screen as my students, with us kind of able to look at it together. Yeah, check that out. I don't know where back in 2020, I made a bunch of tutorial videos on doing the technical side of doing some of these things. I'll see if I can dig some of those out as well. But yeah, especially if your full-time teaching setting is at an online school, then it could be worth figuring out just a couple of those things, since you'll get a lot of mileage out of them over the course of the year.